back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. We broadcast this live at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which you can watch on the WP-Tonic Facebook page. What can I say to you, beloved listeners and viewers? We've got a very touchy WordPress panel already. They've put me in my place already. I think they're fired up. They've got me fired up. So I think it's going to be a good show. So starting from Sally. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Let's see, who am I? My name is Sally Getch. I am the WP fangirl and the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California, and the person with the pestery cat.
Well, see what you've been missing, Spencer. See what you've been missing. So we've got Spencer Forum in the house. Would you like?
It was a long summer and a good summer, but it's almost over. I'm Spencer Foreman from WP Launchify. I help people who need to get their WordPress membership sites sorted out.
There you go. And we've got Chris from Lifter LMS. Would you like to introduce yourself, Chris?
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, and I help WordPress freelancers and agency owners when they're focusing on the LMS online course and membership site niche. I have a product called Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress LMS plugin.
Great. And we got the Viking in the house. Morton, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Morton. I live in Vancouver, Canada, and I have opinions.
I'm sure you're going to share them. John, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I'm John Locke, and I help manufacturing and industrial companies with SEO.
Right, and before we go into the main stories of this week, I want to talk about one of my great sponsors, and that's Kinsta Hosting. Well, what is Kinsta Hosting? Well, they only specialize in WordPress hosting, and if you're looking for quality, powerful hosting, they're the people to go to. If you've got a membership website, if you've got WooCommerce for clients or for yourself, do yourself a favor and go over to Kinsta. They've got all the latest technology. They use Google Cloud as their backbone. What you get is superb 24/7 support from people that really know what they're talking about. No need, you're not going to be serrated up to somebody in the end that does know what they're talking about. You talk to people that know what they're talking from the first ticket that you send them. And also you get a fantastic UX design interface that's fully customized and really easy to use. You don't have to spend half an hour trying to work out how the interface works. If that sounds interesting, and it should be, go over to kinsta.com, have a look at their plans and sign up with them. And also do me a favor and Twitter them and tell them that you heard about them on WP Tonic. So on to the first story. Niger Forms, parent company, Saturday Drive requires CalderaWP. What do you reckon of this one, Sally?
All right. Well, I don't know. I was a little surprised by it, but perhaps I just don't pay enough attention in the space. But Ninja Forms and Caldera Forms are both fairly popular form plugins that have a freemium model. We did an assessment of form plugins in our meetup a few years back, and Caldera Forms offers probably the most features for, in their free version. And they also had this really nice kind of visual form builder. I think there's, other form plugins have kind of caught up in that, but they were early in there. And they have different kinds of freemium models. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these. Are we going to have the Ninja Caldera combo, or are they going to focus some on different markets? I noticed the comment that says, Caldera Forms is like, the developers form plugin. And I don't know, all the developers I know still use Gravity Forms because they have the best dev license deal.
Well, if you're fathered in, yeah. So what do you reckon, Uncle Spencer?
Well, this is like a repeating theme to me. It's not a big story in any way, but it's just representative. We're going to see a lot more of these consolidation stories because there are now 972 different ways that you can add a form to a website, not the least of which is through your page builder, through your theme, through Gravity Forms, through Ninja, through this, through that, through other, and who needs it? So at the end of the day, it makes sense that if you're one of the smaller players, team up with the other small players and try to make some go of it. But despite the numbers in the past, I just don't see any real reason why Caldera needed to exist. Ninja is an interesting comparable to Gravity, because I will say that Gravity is essentially the only solution that anyone needs. However, it's getting competition from natively inside of the page builder. That's the way I see it, which is like, why do I even need Gravity anymore? And the only reason that Gravity keeps existing is because it's like one of those tools or gadgets you have, you only need it once a year, but when you need it, you need it. You know, like the little thing you put through a needle to, if you don't have good eyes, to pull the thread through. After that, all the basic stuff is just built in. So I think this is a trend.
Well, I think it was the pincer movement. I think you're partially right. I think it's the page builders for the non-developer or the semi-non, the full-time developer and the, in-house or the part-time developer, whatever you want to classify them, a power user. So a lot of that crowd got into Gravity Forms. So they got the grandfather license. So they stick, and the hobby, the non-technical crowd, they're fulfilled by the page builders. So what?
It depends a whole lot on what kind of a form you need. If you need a simple contact form, that's getting to be something where you don't necessarily need a separate form plugin. But
it's the thing it does. It's the transaction behind it. Because right now, for example, and I just ran a video this week on this topic. If you just use any of the page builders forms, the front end part is now beautiful right out of the box. It's what it does on the back end. Yeah. For most beginners, like you say, it's just, I want to take a first name, last name email and send it somewhere or add it to a CRM or use it locally. But if you want to do something really magical, that's when you now have to compete with the features, let's say Gravity Forms versus ACF versus maybe what Ninja does. And it really becomes less and less appealing to use multiple things, because once you learn the tricks, you just want to rinse and repeat again. So I think that's where, the difference of what has come to this point versus what will happen in the future will have a lot to do with how much functionality the page builders put in, because all the new users, for 80-20 kind of purposes, they'll get everything they need right from Elementor or Divi or whatever and be done with it.
It just depends when it comes.
God forbid you get anything at all from Divi.
All right, on to Chris. What do you reckon, Chris?
There's a couple really cool business lessons in here. One, we're talking about Gravity Forms. There's this concept called the first mover advantage. And people don't, once they really get into a form, in my experience, a tool, they don't really switch that often. Like I started using Gravity Forms, 10 years ago, and I still have the license and been paying. So like once people commit, they're probably pretty committed. So there's always an opportunity for, if you're in a market like that where people don't switch easily, like I imagine people don't really switch easily once they become a Beaver Builder person or an Elementor person, they kind of commit. The other thing is...
Well, I actually use both, actually.
I know some people do, but I think you're the exception to the rule. The other thing is
you're not the only one that said that to me.
Yeah. The other thing is that they have two options. They could create a migration plugin, migrate all users into Ninja, and just do it as a user acquisition play. But it sounds like they're going to keep the brand separate and just really double down on developing a customer avatar that is different for each product. Because forms are ubiquitous on all websites, there is a big opportunity for really niching focus instead of having a Me Too option. So if Caldera is going to be for developers and Ninja is going to be more regular user focused, you can just start going down that path. The other thing is, I think we're just going to see more maturing in the WordPress ecosystem, where there's more companies like Sandhill Development, Awesomotive, like Ninja Forms, Saturday Drive, and now they have other products under that banner. So we're just going to be seeing more of that. And I know both the teams at those products, and they're all good people. And really, at the end of the day, what I see here is just good people working together and there's strength in numbers when you come together and put good people and good product together.
Right. What do you reckon, Morton?
Yeah, what everyone else has said is true. This is the consolidation of everything. It's the same thing that's been happening for a long time. It'll result in less competition, which is exactly what consolidation means. The monopolization of any kind of free market is always the end goal of any kind of free market. Eventually, you end up with no competition, one single product that just is not that great and tries to solve everything for everyone. If you go to Toys R Us, no, you can't because you're in the United States. If you go to any kind of toy selling store in the United States,
yeah, keep thinking because I'm not sure there are any left.
Target or Walmart or something like that, you'll see that they have a large toy section, but the actual variance and availability of toys in that section is smaller than a tiny little shop in Germany, because market consolidation and monopolization leads to products that are just streamlined for the masses. Competition goes away, everything just becomes the same, and you get this homogenized, weird, corporate absurdia where no one gets what they want. So I actually want to see more competition in these markets, not more consolidation. But at the same time, I totally understand why people want to sell, because when a company starts throwing enough money at you, it's very hard to say no. So,
well,
congratulations to Caldera for
a
competitive product out of this. Unfortunately, it leads to less competition in the market. So whatever.
Well, I don't exactly agree with you there, because I think there's a lot.
I'm shocked.
I think there's a lot. Oh, fuck you! I think there's a lot of competition in the form plugin market. I think that reading the article, and I actually did read the article. He said that they were treating it like a part-time endeavor. And it got so far, but they knew that, they needed to, really focus on the product. I don't think that was total spin, because I know the two.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with us selling. I'm saying this is part of a larger trend in the WordPress community that, and
everywhere else.
A larger trend. Yeah, exactly. This is something that happens in
I just don't see it.
Space we end up with consolidation. And it's like, it can be a good thing, but it can also lead to exactly that, because the next step for any company that starts acquiring their competition is to squeeze out the ones they can't acquire, right? So we'll end up with an arms race between Gravity Forms and Ninja Forms. That's what the end result of everything that's been happening in the community for a very long time is. We'll end up with two behemoths. It'll be Gravity Forms and Ninja Forms. And whichever one of those gets bought by one of the really big players like WP Engine or Google or something like that, will end up just taking basically all the developer market share. So I don't know.
All right. But, I think there's about 3 to 4 other considerable players in that market.
And there is always the possibility of disruption. But I think Morten is right. We do see this happening as sectors mature. And, it is something that it's a case where what's good for your individual company is not necessarily going to be good for the market.
What do you reckon, John?
You're muted.
Yeah, I think this deal was actually in place from what it seems for a little while, or it probably was going to go that way, and that's why Christy, I'm going to say her last name wrong, sorry, but that is why she's at Liquid Web now. It's unfortunate that she did not come along in this acquisition. Josh came along. Some other developers joined the team at Ninja Forms. I think what everybody said is right. It is consolidation. The smaller players are getting, acquired or shuttering. So at least this is a graceful exit, and they're part of a larger team. So the bigger fish eat the smaller fish. That's the way it goes.
Right, on to the next story. Update sanctions and open source. Would you like to introduce this article to us, Morten?
Yeah, so if you've been paying close attention, in U.S. politics over the past couple of years. You will know that the current administration of the United States has some very strong opinions about how to handle what they consider enemies. And one of the things that happened was last year, so 2018, the current administration passed a ruling that said that you couldn't have any trade relations with countries that they deemed to be on the, I don't know, whatever, bad list of the world or something like that. I forget the exact name of it, but it's basically like
The
states
of evil.
Yeah, states that support terrorism in some sort of very.
So they're on the naughty list, are they?
So the list is Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, and the Crimea region of the Ukraine, which is very vague.
It's not a great list of honor, is it?
No, it's not. So, but this rule is that no American company can have any dealings with anyone in those countries or originating from those countries. And this has a direct impact on a lot of open source projects because services like Slack and GitHub have blocked access to the services for people who are from those countries or people who live in these countries. So right now, all of WordPress's ongoing communication happens on Slack. That means that anyone who is either from or living in Crimea, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, or Syria cannot be part of the WordPress Slack anymore. This week, GitHub started closing or blocking the accounts of anyone from these regions as well. So that means anyone from these same regions cannot do anything except look at GitHub. They cannot take part in conversations on GitHub. They can't have their own repositories on GitHub. They can't send pull requests or add issues or anything else, which is actually a serious problem for open source because the fact that you live in a country that has problematic politics does not by default mean that you are developing nuclear weapons, which is what this is all about. They're basically saying you can't have any kind of account or anything on a service that you may be able to develop a nuclear weapon on. So what's happened is a ton of repos that exist on GitHub have been permanently blocked because they're run by people from one of these countries. A ton of users have been permanently blocked from these services. And there's now an unknown number of WordPress contributors and WordPress users who are no longer able to take part in conversations around WordPress, which brings up a really important question, which is the reason why this is happening is because WordPress has chosen to use these commercial services that are based in the United States to host some of their project. And now those commercial services, because they're in the United States, are being forced to lock users out, which goes against the principle of WordPress being an open source community. So now we, as the WordPress community, need to make some decisions about where we want our conversations to take place and how we ensure that the unilateral actions of a single country, which are very unbalanced, impact our open source community. That's the crux of the story.
Right, yeah. Anybody else want to comment on it?
Well, I think this is another example of the fact that sanctions almost always hurt the usually already oppressed people who live in the countries they're applied against much more than they hurt the governments and the people in power that we're trying to put pressure on. And it's probably still better than invading and bombing them, but it's not. It's unfortunate that the people who get damaged are often the ones who are innocent. And it does highlight this issue of like, well, what happens to you when when you don't own a platform that you rely on? And part of the point of self-hosted WordPress is ownership.
Yeah, my biggest disappointment is the French on this list. That is my biggest. What do you reckon, Chris?
Jason, I was talking to Jason Cohen a while ago from WP Engine, and he said something about how people don't really realize how big the internet is. And, he was talking a little bit about the strategy of WP Engine or something like that. But I think a lot of us have a really selfish approach to the internet. We go there to be entertained, to get information, to build a business, to whatever, all this stuff. But I just think what this article highlights and what Morten is saying as well speaks to is that having just spending some conscious energy to thinking about the power of the internet and what distributed really means, what open source really means, and just look at this problem. I mean, I don't have a solution right now on the top of my head, but the reality is if you help people, you know, for example, have jobs, like contribute to WordPress or, you know, build software companies or participate, become freelancers, whatever, you're actually kind of you're empowering the people in that country. So you're kind of having the inverse effect of what the goal is. And I understand the right of a nation also to figure out what it needs to do to cut off the flow of potential resources that could be used to hurt them. But this is an interesting problem that I would encourage a lot of people to just spend time thinking about.
Right. Let's go on to story 3. WP Engine requires StudioPress a year later. What did you think of this article, Sally?
All right. Well, I put this one in there because partly I was like, holy heck, it's been a year already. But, you know, I am involved with the Genesis community, and I've seen, you know, what's been happening since this acquisition. And, you know, it's been good. There's been a lot of effort put into the development of Genesis and switching the way that it works and the way the themes work over from these widget-based homepages, which were like, you know, they made sense in 2011. They were really past their prime by now, and moving that over to Gutenberg and opening up the repo and putting making a lot of stuff available to more people. So I think it's been good, and it would appear from the post that Brian Gardner wrote that you know, he thinks it's been good. And this is, you know, one of those, we're back to the consolidation topic of course, but this is one of those issues where it's not a competitor acquiring somebody, but, you know, sort of a super competitor that some, you know, and we've seen that there have been a lot of acquisitions by hosting companies to try to differentiate themselves, because, you know, hosting is not, you know, hosting is pretty much a commodity, to try to differentiate themselves by having different kinds of products in their portfolio.
I tell you, people say hosting's a commodity. It's only a commodity until you're dealing with a crappy hosting company.
Well, but that's why it's crappy, right? That it's treated as a commodity.
I've got a phone call after this that I'm not looking forward to. It's going to freaking take me an hour to get some freaking sense out the butt. Spencer, what did you reckon?
I have a couple of unique takeaways from this that I don't want to sound critical, because they're not, but they're surprising to me personally. Maybe you guys can relate to this. First of all, I remember fondly the days of early WordPress when there was, I think Chris Pearson was responsible for it, but like function-based themes versus everybody else. And then Brian with Genesis probably took it and ran and made it into what it was. But there was always that line, are you the type of person who wants to work with functions, or do you want to work with like a WYSIWYG interface? Now we're so far beyond that with page builders. It was sort of like somebody reminding me of a girl I dated in high school. I'm like, oh, Jesus, people still use Genesis? But then when I realized what they're working on, it sort of makes sense, because we all know that, you know, the folks at WP Engine are smart and realize that managed hosting really isn't what it was before as far as what it means. It means one-stop shop. And in order to expand their business, just like GoDaddy is doing, they're trying to acquire everybody related, including Studio.
Remember, WP Engine has become a digital experience platform.
But when you go to the page now for StudioPress, it all comes together. 3 elements make sense to me. It's, why does somebody need this all-in-one experience? Well, if you're a freelancer and you still have clients,
I'll give them an experience. Yeah.
Hold on. If you're a freelancer and you have a client, you will be attracted to this package. Why? Because it allows you to still be the priest of the temple, where the person will have no access to what you made for them because you're still doing it through functions. However, they are focusing on using Gutenberg blocks, which would give you just enough leverage to your client to go, look, you can play with the WYSIWYG toys. But what you're really getting is a one-stop shop where somebody will support the hosting problem, the how does this all work problem, a big community of existing users, but you are essentially choosing to drive on that side of the road. And that's what I see this all coming to, which is it's another example of how people will just go to one place that has everything you need in the flavor that you want, with the people that you want. And if you have clients, they will give you the things you need in order to at least have value to people who will come to you to do it for them. Because I don't know of any mere mortal that would choose to use Genesis, if they're not a WordPress person, over, let's say, Divi or Elementor, because it just doesn't make sense. But if you've come from that world, I see why you would absolutely want to use that. Because now you can go to people, look, it's very hard to do this stuff, and I can do it for you. And the people on the receiving end don't know any better.
Yeah, I agree with you there. What do you reckon, Chris?
I think one of the most interesting parts of the article was they talked about the most annoying problem on the internet, which is they've couched that with a one-click theme setup. So basically, if you install WordPress, or you install a theme, or you install a plugin, and you're starting with the blank page, there's so much opportunity to improve all that. If we look at a theme company like Astra, they created Astra sites. So they worked on that problem. Astra is now very successful. That issue, if I could give a piece of advice to anybody building WordPress plugins or WordPress themes about reducing friction between the install and the end result, that people at what they actually bought and their goals, that's where all the value is. So focus on that. And yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, I think also Breezy, I'm doing some really interesting stuff. I'm going to be interviewing the founder of Breezy in the next couple of weeks. That should be an interesting interview, because I think they've got a really interesting product as well. Moulton, what do you reckon?
So there was a couple of paragraphs that really stood out to me in this article, which is, one of the most special things we did to fulfill our goal of being the most open community in WordPress was to form the Genesis Shapers late last year. The Genesis Shapers are a representative group of Genesis community and product leaders from around the world who meet every month to discuss the future of Genesis. In addition to the Shapers providing another channel of community feedback, each month we post a recap of what was discussed in the Shapers meeting, so everyone else in the community can see what was discussed and get a chance to voice their own opinions. So this is a good move from Genesis end to say that we, the people who build the tool, might not know what is the best path forward for the tool all the time, because we're way too inside the tools. We need to use the people who actually use it to get some feedback. And it shows that in the WordPress community at large, there's a widening understanding of this need for more user feedback, for more user-directed development, and for better governance. And this is a good example of a step in that direction. That was my takeaway from this article.
Yeah, that was a great point. Thank you, Moulton. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody summed it up. You know, they had to do something, because traditional themes, without a page builder or without Gutenberg integration, it's dying days for that. That's kind of the way forward, and that's kind of the way that the WordPress project is going, is to compete with more of the WYSIWYG stuff. I do think that there is a place for writing functions, but I think, you know, part of the sales of Genesis was the fact that that kind of market had probably hit its peak. So I think it's a good move, them joining with WP Engine. So still a year later. So
well, thanks, John. So we're going to go for our break, folks. We've got some other good stories in the second half. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. We've had a bit of a chat. It's kind of the last month of the summer. The panel been a bit better to me, but there we go. I'm sure in this section they'll be back to their normal selves. So on to the next story. There's an underground economy selling links from the New York Times, BBC, CNN. What do you reckon about this one, John? What did you think of the dark web?
Yeah, this isn't really the dark web, but I mean, this is a business. This doesn't just happen. This does not just happen with the New York Times or the BBC or Forbes or anything like that. This happens like all the way down to local bloggers. This is how a lot of people get links. And, you know, the Google guidelines say don't buy links or whatever, but
well, first of all, explain
what the story is.
Explain what this is. Yeah, that's probably a good place to start. So SEO basically, for people to rank in Google, there's a couple of factors that are in play. You know, content on the page.
Just a few.
Yeah, there's a lot, but basically the main ones that hold the most weight is the actual content of the page, how people interact with the page, and different websites that backlink to you. And more often than not, if your content is awesome and the design of your site and the UX is awesome, what it's going to come down to is how many sites are linking to you, especially in your category. So what this article is about people, they talk to different authors that they write for these different publications. And in fact, a lot of the links on Forbes and entrepreneur.com and these different places are no followed links, meaning they don't pass what's known as a page rank or adaptive page rank or link juice. They don't pass that voting power of hyperlinks linking to other sites, because they know that people are selling these on the side because they have become authors for that site. And basically they have a side business of selling hyperlinks to other people's sites to help boost their SEO. But yeah, definitely this goes on. Of course it goes on. But you know, it goes on at all levels of SEO. There's a lot of people that you know, do local SEO doing the same thing. They'll approach local bloggers and they'll say, like, can you give me a link on this you know, post from, you know, 3 years ago? And you know, Google sees that, and that link is like a vote for the site that's getting linked to. I mean, that's the whole thing with private blog networks, which is like a whole nother discussion. Article farms and all this. Link selling is a big business. So, you know, but the whole point is they're getting links from sites that have a high level of trust with Google. There are sites that have a good reputation. And
that's what gives me. But the brutal fact is, if you because you know, there's a few in Northern Nevada. There's one particular PR company that's got strong links to a national publication, and she kind of sold it. The principal of the PR agency, you know, she kind of touted it, and I actively saw it work. You know, she got a piece that they wrote into this national publication. 3 days later, there was 25,000 people going to that particular website. You know, it does work, doesn't it, John?
I mean, I think, of course it works. I think that the biggest difference, I mean, you see it like happen in our own community. I think the biggest difference is you want to build links not only through the quality and the of your content. I'm searching for the word here, but basically earning it through that. But the other way that people do it is through their relationships with people over time. You know, a lot of SEOs and a lot of people on the web, marketers in general, and consider everybody here like a marketer. You know, you are friends with different people, and that's how you're going to get links over time, more so than just, you know, reaching out to people random people that email you saying, I can blog for you. Here's all the sites that
there's plenty of people who are trying to get you to link to their sites with, you know, for free. So,
yeah. So what do you reckon about
I mean,
Sally?
I get those emails all the time. And,
yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think probably everyone does, like irrespective of whether what they write is even remotely influential or high ranking. They just blast this stuff out. And but yeah, I mean, developing relationships is kind of how the world works. That's what we're like as a species. But you know, people want shortcuts, and people have been trying to game SEO for a very, as long as SEO has been a thing.
Yep. What do you reckon about it, Spencer? Or have you nodded off?
I think this is funny for two reasons. One, it's funny. Journalism of BuzzFeed.news has apparently gone down when they're like making
it's the same.
Like, this is an article in 2019. Like, oh my God!
Yeah, like this is news. It's true.
You know, I don't know if you knew this, but I have this new type of phone to replace my tree out. It's called an iPhone. It's all brand new. You know,
I never knew that existed.
The second thing that's really interesting to me is, like, if you have backlinks and the world has 6.5 billion plus people and you don't keep paying for your old domain, are you really surprised that there's dudes just like looking for traffic sites that they'll buy the domains for 50 cents on the dollar and then repoint it? Is this really surprising as a mechanical thing? Because like that's what recycle people do who go collect plastic bottles and tin cans. There's a whole economy of people who are just making their living from cleaning up garbage, which is good for society. If you don't want to keep paying for, too bad about bobbysue.com, then don't be surprised when it ends up going to a porn site, because that's what's going to happen.
I know some real high, agencies, and they got a whole army of subcontractors in various places, and you got to throw some real money. But that's the contradiction of Google. If you got the money, you can get your site ranked pretty quick. It just depends. It just depends if you really got on Google's radar, and that normally happens because your competitors start sensing you're doing something and they inform on you. But it just
the snitching thing is looked down on in SEO, like snitching on people and generally speaking, snitching on people really doesn't do anything. So if you're considering reporting spammy stuff to Google, you're better off trying to rank your own site. I will say too, what Spencer's talking about, picking up drop domains, that definitely can help. But the cleaning company that's mentioned in this article that linked from the author's byline link back to her site, they're not ranking in their target market on page 1 at all. So take that as you will. It doesn't necessarily help a whole ton if that's all you're doing.
All right, on to the next story. Artificial intelligence and Norwegian gender quotas. What did you reckon of this one, Morton?
Someone else should start, if anyone actually read it.
Spencer, what did you think of this one?
I always come back to Boston Dynamics, but this one didn't have to do. That's company with the dogs that will eat your face and open the door for you. But
such cuddly creatures, such cuddly creatures.
Aside from putting this stuff into actual moving devices, which is ultimately the end game here, the point of this article is really simple. If you have the physical capability to measure and track millions and millions and millions and millions of points of data, whether it's visual or auditory or transactional or people moving or GPS, and it all goes into one device written by a bunch of mad scientists paid for by the Department of Defense, eventually what is going to happen is that they are going to use humans to try to program that AI into making decisions, which ultimately will be bad, because it will be like the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick before he became Matthew Broderick today. It will be like the computer either will figure out and then stop itself, go, whoa, or it will just destroy humans, because we can't believe, nobody can seriously believe that if you create all this data going into an AI written by somebody in 2019 and beyond, that somehow they're going to have the ability to stop that thing from running away at 1,000,000 miles an hour and going, oh, I was programmed to kill those things that look like they're walking around the streets. Oh, those happen to be humans? Too bad. And that's what's going on right now, is that I don't think we even have a fraction of an understanding of what's actually being done today let alone what will happen tomorrow. And this is just funny because it always comes down to the same thing. There's always enough money all the time for military stuff. There's never enough money for anything that is beneficial.
There's no money for schools or health.
No, schools, healthcare, you know, no. But to create this kind of
you can never afford that.
And it's really, I mean, the best way I think of this is it literally is just watch Tom Cruise in Minority Report. This is just Minority Report. You're walking down the street, all the signs start going, oh, Spence, there he is. Say Spence, Spence, Spence. And then you got to take your retinas out and you got to wear a thing. And
But surprise, it just comes from these nice Norwegian people. But there you go.
The robot I'm talking to is saying Spencer is talking about a different article from what you're talking about. He's talking about the It's Sentient article and The Verge, not the article on the Medium.
I am on the Verge article.
Yes, but
the rest of us are not.
There are two AI articles.
There are two AI articles.
Oh well, yeah. Sorry,
we're talking about the Norwegian.
No. Let's keep talking about this because they link together.
All right.
So we're gonna do this one first and then the other one.
If I had my artificial intelligence, I would not have made that mistake.
Well, I was confused. It was all, you know, I was under pressure.
You guys are wondering whether I need coffee.
But
I don't even know who the other article is.
These crazy Norwegian people. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Right. You're going to say something, Morten?
No, I was just going to say this is like these two stories link together perfectly. So we should discuss this one first and then the other one afterwards.
With you, I'm confused. You confused me. I'm sorry, Chris.
I got something to throw in there just to set up the conversation and where Morten's going to get into it. Sometimes there is a gender preference. So if you go to a massage parlor, they will say, "Do you want a man, woman, or it doesn't matter?" Usually. So in some contexts, like that exists, but then when it comes to this article is about, you know, the imbalance of women and men in tech and what AI and stuff. So I just kick it over to Morten. I'm looking for when is it acceptable, when is it not acceptable, and crossing the bridge from human making the choice versus AI making the choice in terms of gender preference. I'm looking to Morten for some advice on how to think through this.
Well, I think both articles point to the basic, you know, garbage in, garbage out concept of computers. Is that, you know, the article about Norway is highlighting the fact that there is so little input in a lot of this stuff from women, you know, from people of color, from any point of view but one, and that sets you up to make mistakes that can be very damaging. And then when you take that to the level of something like, you know, Skynet, which is sort of what we're getting with the Sentient article, then that the amount of damage that can be done is, as Spencer pointed out, you know, immense. That because all of this is created by humans, we put our own flaws in it, and there has been a tendency to put certain types of flaws into the design of everything, which relates to my recommendation for this week. And you know, that's going to, if it continues to be done without input from diverse viewpoints, then it's going to be especially damaging to, you know, it's going to magnify any current problems of racism, misogyny, etc., because it gets built into artificial systems that we somehow think are impartial.
Mm-hmm. So AI, or there's no such thing as AI, machine learning amplifies bias. That's what it does. It just looks at enormous data sets and then it says, where are the biases in this data set? And that's that's human behavior. That's the actual purpose of machine learning. So what ends up happening is when we feed machine learning biased data, we get extremely biased output. And by and large, the data that's being fed to machine learning algorithms skews heavily Caucasian, skews heavily male, skews heavily towards relatively wealthy, skews heavily towards a lot of types of privilege. And what ends up happening because of that is the people that don't fall into the category, male, cisgendered, privileged, white, are disadvantaged by these technologies. So what this article talks about is how in social sciences for the past 50 years, there's been an enormous amount of research on how to make sure that societies are not biased. And what they've discovered is, and this is an irrefutable fact, in spite of what idiots like Jordan Peterson say, no, hold on here. So this is extensively researched and proven in fact that in the case of a biased system, the only way to force the biased system to not be biased is to actively impose rules on it. To say that if you have a problem where it's like you have boards of directors that are 100% male, because of bias, they will naturally just pick more males to sit on that board of directors. And this is, you can shake your head as much as you want. This is how human brains work. You pick things that look like yourself. So what they do is they say there has to be some sort of enforced requirement for having some form of diversity in this. What ends up happening then is you bring in people who don't fit the standard mold. Those people vote for people that look like them, and as a result, over time, you get to a system where you don't need those rules anymore. Because once you have a balance in the system, the balance balances itself. And what he's talking about is the so-called Norwegian experiment, which has become a really hot topic in all of these anti-feminism, because they keep saying that it doesn't work, which is hilarious because it works extremely well. So, and all you need to do is like look at the composition of everything in Norway or Sweden or Denmark right now, and you'll see that the gender composition actually works fine because of these rules. So what they did was they said, for any type of steering committee, governance, anything like that, there has to be a gender quota. You cannot have a board of only men. There have to be women on the board as well. And over time, the result of that is now Norway has a female prime minister and has had for the past 10 years. Norway has like the defense minister, the minister of the economy, and like the two other highest posts are all held by women. The majority of the political parties in Norway are run by women. Like there's been an enormous shift in gender. And the result of that is not that all of a sudden Norway becomes like a militant feminist country, but there is a shift in priorities of what ends up happening. This article talks about how there is a need for that kind of behavior in AI development because there is such an underrepresentation of underrepresented groups, including women, people of color, people who don't conform to standard heteronormative values, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, there are a lot of people for political reasons who are against this. They are typically white men with a lot of money. And they write books about this shit and say that all this research just proves that women don't want to work in technology and all this stuff, which is complete nonsense and has no relation to reality at all. These people are usually people who have no experience in the field they're talking about. They're expert on some other thing that has nothing to do with it, but they just sell themselves as expert. So you can either choose to look at the people who've been researching this stuff for 50 years, who have published extensive amounts of work on it, and who have proven it through actual implementation in entire countries, or you can choose to believe the people who are strongly politically motivated to drive an agenda of anti-women, anti-race, anti-everything, and buy their books and then promote their bullshit. But seriously, it's bullshit.
That's your opinion.
No, that's not my opinion. That is the opinion of science. You can be on the side of science, or you can be on the side of people who are against it.
I think
you can throw at it.
Sorry, what was that, Sandy?
I said people will choose to believe what they want to believe in the face of all evidence. Do not, and this is the political environment in which we are operating. No evidence shall interfere with my faith. It's like everything has treated like religion.
I do understand where you're coming from. The point I was trying to make to you, Morten, is that forcing having quotas for various organisations or professions and that, in my opinion, is shocking and undemocratic.
No, it's not.
Core.
No, it's not.
Well,
It's a response to a system that is by default is biased against those people. So you know this idea of meritocracy that has also been proven to be complete bullshit. The idea that you can have a group of people who are homogenous, who will naturally pick the people who are the most skilled when they know that some of those people don't fit into their homogenous view of the world. That's not how it works at all. So what ends up happening is, and there is so much research on this. You can do a YouTube search on it and don't just put Jordan Peterson in front of that YouTube search. And you'll see there's extensive research where what they've done is they've said, no. Listen to this. They did this fantastic study. They did this fantastic study a couple of years ago in New York, where they sent a bunch of people to apply for the same job. And all they did was this was one of those jobs where first you have to submit your resume, and then you have to actually physically go to the interview. And then they had the hirer rank the resumes, and the resumes had fictitious names on them. Right? And what they did was they had names that sounded very much like white men. And then they had names that sounded like white women. And then they had names that sounded like black men and black women and all that kind of stuff, right? And what they found was that the resumes were ranked based on the names of the people. Because when they sent the same exact resumes and they just changed the names of the people, all of a sudden they were ranked differently. So whoever had the most white male name, and then they sent the actual candidates to the interviews, right? And then all of a sudden the very highly ranked candidates, because they turned out to not be what was expected, got ranked much lower, even though the performance of the interviews were actually all the same performance. These were actors that were trained to do the exact same things in the same circumstances. This type of research has been done again and again and again and again. And it shows a very strong bias in human beings towards voting or electing people that look like themselves. This is well documented. And like I said, the reason why this system works, the reason why setting quotas work is because
if you give me the opportunity to say something, that would be nice.
Let Jonathan speak. It might be nonsense.
Go ahead.
We have to let him speak, and it might. And Jonathan is not actually stupid. So
I know.
At some point we want to hear.
Never said to me, Sally. I'm going to throw it over to Chris actually. So Chris, as a white individual who actually employs people in a company, in a commercial company, you got this deep bias, and you just hire people because they look like you, not actually because you think they can do their actual job to the requirements that your business actually needs. You do that all the time, don't you, Chris?
I think you're leading the witness there a little bit, but no, I hire people based on the skills.
All people
hold on 1 second. Let me answer. Hold on. I hire people based on what needs to be done and how they do in the interview and how they do in the sample project. It so happens that our company is half female, half male. White, I have to think about it a sec. I mean, we have lots of different ethnic stuff represented and gender stuff represented in our company. For me personally, it's not I don't consciously focus on an affirmative action style approach. That's just sort of naturally who I am, and I believe in the importance of a diverse team, and that people bring different things from different backgrounds and qualities that make them different. So that's what I have to say. But I do think society as a whole sometimes needs a little bit of help with that. That's why the government instituted desegregation and so on. And not everybody is progressive and forward thinking and open-minded and accepting and valuing differences over sameness. So that's I'm probably in the minority of just that type of mindset, I guess. And then I just wanted to, not as a challenge, but as a thought experiment to Jonathan Dimwood, I'd love to see more women on this show.
Well, I've tried, and if you can persuade some people from the WordPress community that are females to come on the show, they are most welcome. I have spent hours and hours with outreach trying to get women on this show, and I'm basically given up because they just won't do it.
Well, I've suggested it to a few people and asked them to get in touch with you, but of course, I think part of the problem is. Women have an enormous burden of extra responsibilities that most men don't. I mean, Spencer is a single dad, so he probably has more of those responsibilities than most men do. But there is a huge amount of extra time that you have to spend on, the children and the household and the spouse and the this and the that, if you are female in most societies than you do if you're male. And it means there is less free time to do anything.
I'm so tempted to respond to that, but I'm not going to. Actually, I'm going to throw it over.
What Sally just said is correct, though. Women have to do. Men just have to go to work. That's it. In most cases, and women have to. Women have to go to work and do all the housework. In most cases.
Stop handing Jonathan a shovel. He's trying desperately to not use it.
All I've got to say, John, is that I do understand your position, John. But in the personal relationships I have, they've always been pretty equal, where I did half of the household chores.
So realize that in spite of your personal experience, the vast majority of people in the world have a different experience.
Of course,
that's why this is tricky, because when you come, this is the problem of empathy. Empathy is not you understing the experience of other people. It's you imposing your experience on other people. So the fact that we think that this is not a problem, and the fact that we're informed about this issue, does not mean it's an actual problem, that the problem isn't there. It just means that the problem is out of our view. Right. Well, and what these articles talk about is how, in spite of everyone trying to do the right thing, and in spite of it feeling like it's going in the right direction, it's not actually doing that. And we need to proactively start doing something about it, like introduce methodology that actually works.
Right. I just want to point out, it's like the 18 months that I lived in Norway with my Norwegian girlfriend. And the first week I was in Morley, and I opened a door for a female, and she started having a go at me, and my girlfriend starts laughing. And then when this woman, after 10 minutes of berating me, she stomps off. I asked my girlfriend what happened there, and she said she called you everything under the sun as an ignorant British bastard and an anti-feminist.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and I thought to myself, no, I was just taught manners by my mother, fundamentally. What do you reckon, Spencer?
I mean, I just don't think any of this is going to matter soon, because what's going to happen is that the gender biases of today, as soon as AI starts taking its own path, we're just humans to it. Like, we're just cannon fodder for the dog robots that are going to come and, take us away. So I'm not saying.
And the dog robots are going to attack women more than men, because
I don't know if I don't know if the gender will come in, but I will say this much. I may be contrarian, and it's not because I'm a single dad mom. I think the world would be a lot better place if women were 100% in charge of government, because I just feel that history has proven, and there's an old Greek tragedy or story, I think it was called Lysistrata, where the men were just fighting and the women were like, hey, we're not giving you any action until you stop fighting, and wars were over. And I think we see all the posturing of male in general. If women ran the world in general, I think it'd be a better place. So if that happens before the dog robots take over, great. If not, I just hope that we just keep moving forward in that direction.
Yeah, well, the reason My Sister was a comedy is that, of course, the premise is ridiculous, because having a sex strike against men who are not there to have sex with is not very useful.
Probably not. In today's world of on demand.
Right, on to the next story. Proposal for WordPress Advisory Board. What do you reckon, Morton? You'd like to tell us about this one?
This is a centralized attempt by the WordPress power hierarchy to actually start making some rational decisions around governance, which is a good thing. They're basically saying that. So there was this thing called what the hell was it called? There was Matt a couple of years ago created these growth councils, which were poorly defined, completely untransparent things where some people got together and said things that no one actually knows what happened to, and then they were dissolved around Christmas last year. And this is kind of Growth Council V2, which is advisory board for the WordPress. So the idea is that people who know what's going on in WordPress and in the wider web get together and talk about what is happening and what WordPress should do, and then they funnel that information up to Matt, and then Matt makes decisions based on it, or something like that. So this is an open proposal, and the reason why it's important is because this is the first opportunity the WordPress community has ever had to have input on how its governance operates. So this post is outlining a very sketchy, like not sketchy as in questionable, but a sketch of a theory of what an advisory board can look like. And it's asking actively the community to have opinions about what that board should look like and how it should operate and who should be on it, and everything from like term limits to turnover to everything else. So if you have an opinion about how WordPress should be run and decision making is done, this would be the place to start voicing those opinions.
All right. I did look at it, and then I actually looked at the structure of Drupal, and they just hired a new head of the Drupal World Association. She's a lady. I'm attempting to see if she'll come on this and tell us about how Drupal is.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying that it's a little bit more better, the organisation of Drupal, actually, Morten?
But, What? That question had no syntactic components that made any sense. What?
Oh, right.
Are you asking if this is better than the Drupal one, or that Drupal is better than this?
Well, Drupal seems to, obviously I don't know a lot about the Drupal community, but by reading this other article about how it was structured, it just seemed a bit better.
Yeah, so WordPress is starting a process now that most open source communities have been doing for the past 5 or 6 years. So if you look at like the JS Foundation or the Node Foundation or the new Open JS Foundation or Drupal or whatever, they've all done the governance work. So they all have things that look better than this right now because they've all done this work. WordPress is just starting to do the work that everyone else has done. So right now it's a very rough outline of something. And yes, you should be going to look at what other people are doing and taking what you think makes sense from them and put it into this project. And there's like a whole project outside the WordPress project called the WordPress Governance Project that kind of tries to do that and has collected an enormous amount of data if you're interested. But if you have an opinion, go to this post and voice your opinion, because this is where you can have influence on how WordPress is run moving forward.
Rightio, on to our picks of the week. So my pick is a plugin called WP-Press, and it helps you. If you want custom login pages, and it does a number of other things. I bought it on a special offer, but I've used it on a couple of sites, and it seems really interesting. So go to, and the link will be in the show notes. But have a look at WP-Press. Sally, have you got anything you want to recommend to listeners and viewers?
Actually, I listened to the 99% Invisible podcast, and they had an episode last week called Invisible Women. I put the link in the chat. And it's an interview with a woman who wrote a book of the same title, and it talks about all of the areas in which there simply was no data collected about women and how things would affect them, and it was assumed that things designed for men would work perfectly well for women, and in a lot of cases this is not true, as any woman who has ever attempted to keep the seatbelt of a car from landing in an awkward position has figured out. The effects range from annoying to fatal, and it's really it's worth listen to the podcast, which will give you a good enough sense of what's going on. I ordered the book and read it, and you might or might not be inspired to do that, but it's just like all of the things that we don't think about and their potential consequences. It's very interesting.
Oh, thanks. Make sure that you can put that in the chat. And Spencer, have you got anything you want to share with the listeners and viewers?
Yes, an oldie but a goodie in today's world. I put a video link there too, but the plugin is a free plugin in the WordPress repository, an odd thing to refer to these days. Admin Menu Editor essentially accomplishes a pain point that I guarantee
I use it on all clients.
has. Why it's still true, I don't know, but WordPress does not have a native sort capability in the admin dashboard. So as you add all your little tchotchkes, you realize that when you're making videos or helping clients, you look like a mental patient because you're over on the left side going, and I did a video to make somebody better the other day, and I realized
I think Morton was saying that about me a few minutes ago.
Right. I realized, like, why isn't this exactly in WordPress? But the admin menu editor's primary function, to me, it does a lot of stuff. You just, like, in 5 seconds can literally just alphabetize everything you have in the admin dashboard and even the submenus. So you just click and then go to each one, click, 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 sort it. And now your brain is able to go, oh, I want to use, Lifter LMS, L, cart flows, C, WP Fusion, W. It made me look like
that's the way you organize it.
Are you one of those people who has like all the icons on your phone sorted by color?
No,
so like all the yellow apps and all the blue apps. No.
That's why this is so surprising. I have a stack of stuff we use, but even with just a basic stack and the accessories, when you start to look at how things randomly drop into the dashboard, every single client's different. And then it's like you're trying to help somebody. You're like, wait, the orders is a submenu of WooCommerce, but then the lessons is different. And then the products is here. And then the Lifter has this, but then I'm in the course builder. And it's like, for God's sake, if you just alphabetize it, at least you can just go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and go to the thing you need.
Yeah.
Big time saver. Try
That's
it.
right. Yeah, I'll try to make sure.
And do it in black and white, like my experiment on the iPhone from months ago.
I found that my phone has a setting to switch to black and white after a certain time period.
Try and get this wrapped up, folks. All right, Chris, got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, my tip is a plugin company called Tangible Plugins. They focus on the membership and the learning space. They're getting very close to launching a really advanced Lifter LMS integration with Elementor. It's going to be called Lifter Element, something to keep an eye on. If you're using LearnDash, they have a Beaver Builder, LearnDash thing.
Like, I'm sorry, but
wait, what does this do? Beaver Dash?
Build LearnDash courses with Beaver Builder.
Yeah. So it basically, this company takes the connection between learning and membership plugins and page builders and just amplifies the options of what you can do. So that's what it is.
I get them on my show, and I have a chat with those.
Yeah, I can make an introduction.
Yes, please do.
This is a very interesting choice of product name. I'm just going to double entendre and leave it at that.
Right, yeah, very wise. Morton.
Go watch the documentary called The Big Hack. It's on, or The Great Hack. Sorry, The Great Hack on I think it's on Netflix in most regions. It'll tell you the story from the inside of the Cambridge Analytica scandal and how Facebook is basically the rottenest thing in the world. And it's a very good documentary, and it's interesting because the story evolves as the documentary is made. So there are like multiple versions of this documentary in existence because as they released the documentary and then things changed, and then they went back and actually changed the documentary to add more data to it. It's a very disturbing, alarming, and eye-opening account of everything that we always talk about, how social media is basically just a machine to program people into doing things. And it lays out proof that, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica is responsible for Brexit, for instance, which is, and it's kind of hard to argue against.
No, the attitudes that led to that were much longer and
yeah,
deeper.
but like the actual,
I can assure you of that.
Well, I know, but when they start explaining what they're doing and how they're operating, you're like, oh my God, this is like a full-on psyops operation. It's not. Yeah, and also very important, Tool has finally released their entire album archive on streaming services. The final holdout. So now the world can actually listen to Tool on streaming services. Happened
And
today.
filter.
Yeah. John, got anything you'd like to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I have two recommendations, and it's a callback to the second story that was on our podcast today, talking about how sanctions affect open source. And one is an article, "What It's Like to Be a Developer in Iran," and it's a woman developer, and talking about how a lot of things are can't be found. Like they can't get on Stack Overflow, they can't Google stuff, and projects end up getting scrapped or people end up getting fired. And I think it just calls back to the fact that, you know, people in other parts of the world, they're not any different from us. They're just people trying to feed their families and get their job done and go about their day, and that's it. And it just highlights how some of these things play out in reality. And the second recommendation, you can find this either as a graphic novel or it's also animated DVD. It's a story called Persepolis by the author Marjane Satrapi, and she was a Iranian person that she grew up when they were making progress. They were making progressive progress, technological progress in Iran, and then the Shah came up, and then the Ayatollah came up, and ever since then, it's kind of been in that position. And though she went to school in Austria, she's since immigrated to the West. But it's just her personal perspective from her childhood, growing up during that time up to now. And it's very insightful, you know.
All right, thank you for that. Make sure the links are in the chat.
They're in the chat.
Oh, thank you. So thank you, panel. It's been an interesting discussion as always. I just want to say a couple of things to listeners and viewers. If you're a female developer, member of the WordPress community, or anybody else that likes to chat, you're most welcome to join the panel as a special guest. If that's of interest to you, please email me. There's a contact form on the WP-Tonic website. We can have a quick Zoom and you'll be most welcome on the panel. And please consider it. I would love to get more female special guests on the WP-Tonic roundtable, and you'll be most welcome. Like I say, if you want to support the show, give us a review on iTunes. It really helps the show. And if you want to see the show the earliest, I normally publish these the quickest on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel, which is growing quite rapidly, which is very nice to see. We'll be back next week with another group of WordPress and other stories and having an intelligent discussion. Well, excluding me, that is. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.